The ANZACS were the bravest things God ever made.
These were not the words of an Australian military leader or an Australian politician. They were spoken by a British officer who had witnessed the heroism of Australian soldiers at Gallipoli. In his opinion, the ANZACS were the bravest things God ever made.
Shores of Suvla and the cliffs at Anzac Cove, the legend of the ANZACS came to be. They were proud to be Australians, volunteers one and all, fighting for king and country. Where they find the courage for those so young, did they know their legend would not fade? And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made.
Gum trees grow at the Lone Pine Cemetery at Gallipoli. They were an Australian gift to the foreign land, which is the eternal resting place of 11,410 ANZACS. Little did these young warriors know that they were forging such an important chapter in Australian history, and that April 25th, 1915, would mark the birth of a nation. How proud they'd be to know that decades and decades later, countless thousands of their descendants would be drawn back to pay homage at the very shore where the legend began. The Turks call it Anzac Koyu. We know it as Anzac Cove. But things at Gallipoli went wrong right from the start. Instead of a gentle rise, they met a sheer cliff face and murderous gunfire. One officer shouted, "They've put us ashore in the wrong bloody place." Yet they laughed at the adversity. A private complained, "They want to cut that shooting out. Someone might get killed." The ANZACS at Gallipoli faced the extremes of trench warfare for 8 long months. Later they fought on the Western Front in France and Belgium and in the Middle East. These men have spoken in song, art and poetry. This poetry gives us a window to their war, their lives and their courage. Some will tell us their stories in this tribute to the bravest things God ever made. A tribute to the ANZACS.
And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made.
The involvement of the Australian Imperial Force at Gallipoli was the first time Australians had fought as a unit. Federation in 1901 had given us nationhood, and the AIF was formed in 1914 at the onset of war. Incredibly, 50% of all eligible men between 18 and 45 enlisted. But the British considered the Australian troops to be untried, unproven, unreliable. They had grave doubts as to how they'd perform under the pressure of battle. Maybe they'd simply turn and run. How wrong they were. In fact, the Australian and New Zealanders earned a reputation as the finest army in the world. The ANZACS won the undying admiration of the British, their Turkish enemy, and later the French and the Belgians, and generations upon generations of Australians. Their fighting spirit was epitomised by an Australian soldier. As he lay wounded on the beach on that first bloody Anzac Day, he urged his mates forward with these words: "Give it to 'em for us, boys. They can't fight like we can." And remarkably, each one of those first Anzacs was a volunteer.
I don't know why. There's 500,000 Australians enlisted. Why did they all enlist?
Oh, it was something that had to be done. It was my duty.
I enlisted really in 1914 when the war broke out in August, about August the 4th or 5th.
When we enlisted, our principal worry was it'll be over before we got there. So it was quite the norm. When you were 17, I mean, you went. Some of them went at 16.
I was young and not very big, but I was strong. But we didn't object. It's all a bit of an adventure. I'd just left school, you see.
I was 18 when I went to the front line. I enlisted at 17 and put the age up.
I think I was about 16, yeah.
They were all exciting places, you know, for a 16-year-old or never really been out of Tasmania before. It was a fairyland.
Well, I didn't like Germans, so I thought, well, somebody's got to stop these swines. I'm a trained soldier. Why shouldn't I go anyhow?
We had no idea the danger we were going to, not one little bit, not until we got into France.
You thought you had to go, you know, you felt like as you wanted to help.
My mother wasn't too happy about it, but when all said and done, someone had to go.
It's a long, long time ago, you know, over a lifetime ago for most people.
Many yesterdays have gone since the ANZACS sailed away. Many moons and suns have shone day and night and day. Since we cheered them to the ships, each to play his hero part, with a farewell on our lips and a Godspeed in each heart. When undaunted and sublime, making history they strove, we were with them all the time by the magic of our love, by that love's transcending power, though between us surged the sea, we were with them in that hour when they scaled Gallipoli.
When you got out of the boat, you only had 10, 15 yards or so of sand and that before you hit the hill, and it went straight from there up. It was fairly steep, and then when you got over the top, it flattened fairly well out. There was miles of flat country.
Bullets there, stray bullets there used to fly around like bloody flies. You never knew when you was going to get it. Oh yeah, sure. We were under fire as soon as we landed there. I was in the front line there. I went up to the front line. While I was there, the Turks attacked. Of course, I couldn't have got out then if I'd have wanted to. If you put your head over the top of the trench, you'd have it blown off in no time. They were shooting through loopholes.
I suppose it was always dangerous on Gallipoli because it was open country. Well, the very front line were nearly always trenches. Places like Quinn's Post had trenches in it. But yes, I suppose you were aware that you could get killed any time, but you couldn't do anything about it. One chap next to me, big country lad, we said to him, "Don't look over the top." I said, "He'll be gone, I see where his eggs." Of course, he wouldn't take much notice of me, and one or two others, he thought, oh, he'd have just a bit of a pop-up. He did. He put his head up like that, and he lit in the trench behind us, dead. Bullet straight through the head.
You can't argue with a dead man. You can't lift his head from the mud and wipe the mud from his eyes and wrangle with him over kings and empires, proletarians and popes. Ask his opinion of a red star or a crooked cross, and he'll not tell you. No stars shine in his black sky. He's only crossed the index to his grave, and he'll not know of that. You can look at him helplessly. You can think, once he chatted and grew indignant over pots of beer, grew red in the face or laughed and said, "You lovely bastard, you." Once he looked at sunsets. Once he plucked grass in the dawn, shook it, and watched the falling iridescent dew flash in the dove-grey light. "It's cold," he said. "It's clean." Once he spoke of Brahms. Once he said, "Let's go on a shikar." Once he said, "Next time I'm on leave, I'm getting hooked. She has brown hair and it's curly, and a funny way of glancing over her shoulder and smiling." But now you want to argue with him. You want to say, "You died for something great. You died for a cause. Wasn't it worthwhile to die for a cause? Wasn't it?" Lay his head in the mud again. Wipe the blood from your hands. You can't argue with a dead man.
The citation for most conspicuous bravery and initiative in action. Percy Stanton skillfully engaged 2 machine gun posts with Lewis gunfire, enabling the remainder of his battalion to advance, armed only with a revolver, in broad daylight. Sergeant Stanton rushed 4 enemy machine gun posts in succession, disposing of 2 of them and killing 5 of the enemy. He set a magnificent example of quick decision, and the success of the attacking troops was largely due to his determined gallantry.
Percy Stanton, he was a wild one. He won the VC there, I saw him do it.
Bit weird at first. That starey look in the eye.
You could see it by the look of him. He wouldn't know what fear was.
The hair down past his shoulders. But after a go with the ship's barber, a seawater shower and the old slouch hat across his ears, he started to look the part.
Yes, old Percy, he deserved his VC if ever a man did.
Took him a while to get the way of paying it fits the old Lee Enfield.
Of course, most cold-blooded courage that was, I think.
But going in on the boats, he looked calmer than any of us.
There's one thing going over with hundreds of bursting shells and all this kind of thing, and machine guns rattling all over the place.
Just gazing in over the swell, where the cliffs look black against the sky.
To go out when you know you can see these guns in front of you, machine guns.
When we hit, he fairly raced him through the waves.
And to go out with no protection whatever in the middle of the day, walk right up to him and shoot him with a pistol.
Then up the beach, swerving like a fullback at the end, when the Turks had really got onto us.
Leaning over the bags within 2-3 feet of him.
Time we all caught up, he was off like a flash, up the cliffs, after his first machine gun.
Well, when he did that, it didn't take us long to shift the rest of them.
He'd done for 3 Turks. When we got there, the 4th was a gibbering mess.
That's cold courage.
Seeing him wave that blood-red bayonet.
He's a good fella, Percy.
I reckon we were glad to have him on the side.
My word, he was a good soldier.
What was he thinking? Would he throw his life away? Did his country mean that much to him that he was blind to the danger that faced him? Did he feel a sense of pride as he wore Australia's colours with his mates by his side? He was more than just a hero, fighting far away from home. He was more than just a soldier, with a duty to be done. He was more than just a digger, with a rifle and a pack. He was a soldier, he was a hero. He was an ANZAC. His medal says for valor, the bravest of the brave. Beyond the call of duty, he rose that day in the face of the enemy, and every was 10 feet taller when he wore the rising sun. He was more than just a hero, fighting far away from home. He was more than just a soldier, with a duty to be done. He was more than just a digger, with a rifle and a pack. He was a soldier, he was a hero. He was an ANZAC, he was a soldier, he was a hero. He was an ANZAC.
Sergeant Statton's Victoria Cross is on display at the Australian War Memorial.
Ah, yes, old Percy, he deserved his receipt if every man did.
The Turks were real good rifle shots, and as soon as they'd see a head come up over the trench, they'd just pull the trigger. Bang!
You don't think of anything much, only living, that's all. You're all the time doing what you can to defend yourself, which was shoot the Turks.
Turks were reasonable enough people, but they were good rifle shots. We found out he was a damn good rifle shot. We weren't the only ones who could use the rifle, and they had rifles set on different places of their trenches, and as soon as they'd see a head come up over the trench, they'd just pull the trigger. You'd be gone.
Poor bloody old Turk was a bad bloke.
You're there in your trench and I'm in mine. We face each other as the foe, but what brings us here into this deadly world? I guess we'll never know. My rifle's aimed at you and yours at me, and I'll shoot you just as soon as I can. But there's no hate between the ANZAC and the Turk, because you played the gentleman. Oh, yeah. You are my enemy and I am yours. We share the struggle to survive. We both know Gallipoli is living hell, where you may be better dead than alive. But keep your head down, that's my advice, 'cause I'll shoot you just as soon as I can. But there's no hate between the ANZAC and the Turk, because you played the gentleman. There's no hate between the ANZAC and the Turk, because you played the gentleman.
Turks were reasonable enough people, but they were good rifle shots.
Poor bloody old Turk was a bad bloke.
Keep your head down, Johnny Turk.
The lasting respect between the Turks and the Australians remains to this day. In fact, if you visit the Turkish memorial to the ANZACS at Gallipoli, you'll read this inscription written by the Turkish military leader, Mustafa Kemal. It reads, "Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore, rest in peace." There's no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets, where they lie side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers who sent your sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom, and they are in peace. Having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons.
I was 16 and they wanted a bugler and they found out that I was there, so they came up and grabbed me.
And every night as the sun used to sink down, he used to play his trumpet. The firing on both sides came to a standstill when this happened, but I suppose because he used to play Silent Night. The Aussies never fired, neither did the Turk. And on one occasion I happened to be passing along through the canal just as he was about to play, and I thought I'd have a look over and see what the Turks are doing. And through a peephole in the side of the thing I noticed the Turks were above the parapets clapping or else belting tins or something, just to show how much they appreciated our trumpeter playing Silent Night.
The 8-month struggle for survival on Gallipoli ended in stalemate. As Christmas 1915 approached, the Australians withdrew, leaving behind over 8,000 mates.
What? Gone? The Australians gone? From Anzac? Gone? The lurid crater where for 8 long months they lived with death, dined with disease, till 1 in every 2 fell ill, and 1 in every 4 was shot, and 1 in every 8 lay dead. Yes, gone. From Anzac, gone. And left behind 8,000 graves.
But I can remember particularly the infantry saying, I wonder if they can hear us leave. Mean, of course, they're dead mates. And they said, I wonder if they can hear us leave. I don't think they actually liked pulling out. It wasn't so much a defeat as a military decision. We didn't feel defeated.
Yes, I was there. I came off in the evacuation day. I think the Navy guns stopped firing for a while. You see, that all the time the big Navy guns were blasting away at the Gallipoli shore.
They had rifles fixed up in the trenches with water dripping on something or other to pull the trigger, and the rifles were still going off while we were down on the beach, while we were leaving the beach, and that of course was to make the Turks think we were still there. That was the best organised thing of the lot. I remember on the boat, going out on the boat to leave the place on the Empress of Egypt, there must have been 5,000 or more bloody men on the bloody ship. I don't know. We often thought while we stand there, Christ, if he only knew we was all here, he'd blow us to bloody pieces. But anyway, we got away.
The defiance of the Anzacs, right to the end, was evident in a note for the Turks pinned to the wall of a trench by a departing Australian soldier. The note read, "Just remember, Johnny, we left. You didn't throw us out."
The guns were silent, and the silent hills had bowed their grasses to a gentle breeze. I gazed upon the vales and on the rills and whispered, "What of these? And what of these?" These long-forgotten dead with sunken graves, some crossless with unwritten memories. Their only mourners are the moaning waves. Their only minstrels are the singing trees. And thus I mused and sorrowed wistfully. I watched the place where they had scaled the height whereon they bled so bitterly throughout each day and through each blistered night. I sat there long and listened. All things listened too. I heard the epics of 1,000 trees, 1,000 waves I heard, and then I knew the waves were very old, the trees were wise. The dead would be remembered evermore. The valiant dead that gazed upon the skies and slept in great battalions by the shore.
The ANZACS had built a magnificent reputation. Their heroic feats at Gallipoli were witnessed by many observers. British General Sir Ian Hamilton.
The Australians who have fought at Gallipoli will bequeath a heritage of honour to their children's children.
British historian M.R. Foote.
The ANZACS were probably man for man the most impressive combatants this century has seen.
British war correspondent Ellis Ashmead Bartlett.
The Australians rose to the occasion. There has been no finer feat in this war than this sudden landing in the dark and the storming of the heights.
Australian Commander General John Monash.
British officers are the first to admit that for physique, dash, enterprise and sublime courage, the Australians are head and shoulders above the others.
Sergeant Lawrence of the Australian Engineers.
Why can't they give us more Australians and New Zealanders? They can fight.
English war correspondent John Masefield.
The Australian Army has become famous all over the world as the finest army engaged in the Great War.
British historian John Terraine.
The Australian divisions and the New Zealanders have become the spearhead of the British Army.
An Australian officer.
Gallipoli was the first time Australia had ever been in a war as a body, and we were determined to go through with it. Every man in the 1st Division absolutely threw their lives away to make a name for Australia.
And Australian newspaper correspondent Keith Murdoch.
If you could picture ANZAC as I have seen it, you would find that to be an Australian is the greatest privilege the world has to offer.
The toast is ANZAC, gentlemen, to ANZAC by the sea, and all the heroes there that fought to keep our country free. The colours on their shoulders tell 1,000 stories true of steadfast courage, knightly faith, and deeds of daring do. The toast is ANZAC, gentlemen. As long as time shall last, we need no costly monument to keep their memory fast. To those who lived, to those who died, now give them 3 times 3. The toast is ANZAC, gentlemen, on far Gallipoli. To the ANZACS!
To the ANZACS!
After Gallipoli, the AIF was expanded from 2 to 5 divisions, all of which were progressively transferred to France, where the war had long settled into a stalemate. The opposing armies had dug 600 kilometres of trenches across Belgium and northeast France, from the English Channel to the Swiss border. Continual shelling had churned the battlefields into mud, with neither side able to take ground from the other. Casualties were horrific, and daily tens of thousands of soldiers were killed in bitter fighting in order to gain a few metres of mud. The ANZACS arrived in France in March 1916 in time to endure that country's coldest winter in 40 years.
1916, that was the worst one they'd had for 40 years, I reckon. Oh gosh, it was terrible cold. Your feet would freeze just about, and what's cool, really cool for us Australians.
The mud was terrible, the conditions were foul. They were infested with rats. The body lice were absolutely crawling with them. And out of the trenches, you couldn't get off duck boards because you'd be knee-deep in mud.
They had duck boards. We used to call them duck boards. They're about 8 feet long, I suppose. 3x1 battens up each side and about a 3x1/2 inch batten across them. They used to put those in the bottom of the trench because in the winter time, just before the real winter came on, in the spring you get a lot of rain and you get all mud and that. So they had these down, you could walk on them, you see.
Sometimes you'd slip off a duck board and you'd be up to your knees almost in mud, clinging, stinking, bloody mud.
The trenches, well, they were just ditches down deep and bits of shelters put over them where you could, and you kept in them as long as you could. You didn't like going out because you're likely to get hit. But in the trench you were fairly safe. The loopholes to shoot through.
Trenches were about 7 feet deep. It'd be about 5 feet across the top and about 2'6" across the bottom.
The ANZACS repeatedly attempted attacks on the German lines. Waves of attacking infantry emerged from the trenches into no man's land and advanced towards the enemy's positions. The Germans, protected by deep and heavily reinforced bunkers, were usually able to repel the attackers with machine gun fire and artillery support. The Germans then would counter-attack, and both sides suffered heavy casualties.
At every cost, they said, It must be done, they told us in the early afternoon. We sit and wait the coming of the sun. We sit in groups, grey groups that watch the moon. We stretch our legs and murmur half in sleep and touch the tips of bayonets and yawn. Our hands are cold. They strangely grope and creep, tugging at ends of straps. We wait the dawn. Some men come stumbling past in single file and scrape the trench's side and scatter sand. They trip and curse and go. Perhaps we smile. We wait the dawn. The dawn is close at hand. A gentle rustling runs along the line. At every cost, they said, it must be done. 100 eyes are staring for the sign. It's coming, look, our God's own laughing son.
The Hun. Fixed bayonets, get ready to run. Machine guns spinning left and right. Maybe we won't live to see another night. Shells and barbed wire, bullets and mines between our trench and the enemy lines. You put your life into God's own hands when you set foot into no man's land.
Our front lines were about 100 yards apart. They called it no man's land, and their trenches on one side of it and ours was on the other.
They decided to charge the German lines. You never seen such slaughter in all your life. Machine guns opened up.
You were playing with death every day. You didn't know when your turn was coming. You'd hear a shell coming down. You didn't know how far away you were from it, where it was going to burst.
Everybody that went to France had to be hit by something.
Shells and barbed wire, bullets and mines between our trench and the enemy lines. You put your life into God's own hands when you set foot into no man's land.
Bombs and shells, all sorts of things were dropping all around any tick of the clock.
Because it was the machine guns that was the trouble. They fire 500 rounds a minute. 3 of those going, there's a lot of lead about.
Well, we used to take much notes of bullets, you know.
And this 5.9, the German shell, the worst shell on the Western Front. Oh my God, when that went off, boy, did it make a noise. I tell you, it's a good thing to be somewhere else when that landed.
We're going over the top for a crack at the Hun. Fixed bayonets, get ready to run. Machine guns spinning left and right. Maybe we won't live to see another night. Shells and barbed wire, bullets and mines between our trench and the enemy lines. You put your life into God's own hands when you set foot.
That was a terrible slaughter.
All these pillboxes open up with machine guns on us. Oh, blimey, our casualties there was tough. From there, then across to the German barbed wire on the other side, and about 40 yards away was these pillboxes, and they just cut them to pieces. You had to step all over the place to get around without treading on them. The Germans had barbed wire right up to their trenches. That was a nasty business.
I suppose you weren't frightened, but you were aware of people were getting bowled over pretty often. In our company, I suppose, while I was there, we had half of them hit. Not killed, but hit. Some killed.
Warned that you were going into action. And this feeling, gut feeling they call it, used to go right up through you. You'd think, well, I wonder, will they have one with my address on it?
The boy cleared out to the city from his home at harvest time. They were Scots of the Riverina, and to run from home was a crime. The old man burned his letters. The first and last he burned, and he scrubbed his name from the Bible when the old wife's back was turned. A year went by and another, and the fruit went down the line. They heard the boy had enlisted, but the old man gave no sign. His name must never be mentioned. On the farm near Gundagai, a Scot of the Riverina, with ever the kirk hard by. The boy came home on his final leave, and the township's bonfires burned. His mother's arms were round him, but the old man's back was turned. His sisters tried to sway him till the old man raised his hand, the Scot of the Riverina, and hard to understand. The boy was killed in Flanders, where the best and bravest died. There were tears in the Graham homestead, and grief in Gundagai. And the old man ploughed at daybreak, and the old man ploughed till the murk. There were furrows of pain in the orchard, while the household went to the kirk. The hurricane lamp in the rafters dimly and dimly burned, and the old man died at the table, while the old wife's back was turned. Face down with his bare arms folded, he sank with his wild grey hair, outstretched on the open Bible, with a name rewritten there.
In Flanders fields, the poppies grow between the crosses, row on row. We felt dawn to live short days ago. We loved and were loved, and saw sunsets glow. And now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high, if you break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow, though poppies grow. Flanders fields. Flanders fields.
There's a very strong French-Australian association, very strong indeed. They really adore the Australians there. I mean, they revere them. They honour Anzac Day more than we do. It's quite incredible, really. The school children in France. These youngsters, after we'd planted our wreath, these youngsters came up and put flowers on the memorial and came back and sang Advance Australia Fair. And I said to this lady, I said, it's wonderful to see these school children putting flowers on the memorial. She said, they do that every week. If they didn't, we'd be ashamed. The children, youngsters, weekly putting flowers on the memorial. That's the tradition on the Somme for the reverence of the Australian soldiers.
We were living more or less below ground level. There you had to, because the shelling, the artillery was terrible in France. That was the worst part of France. And of course that went back behind the lines. That wasn't only in the front line. That's where it was worse.
It'd be in 7 days in and 7 days out. When you came out, you were still under shell fire. As a matter of fact, they killed a captain and a lieutenant. First day, we got up to the support line. Not in the trenches, about half a mile behind it. These two officers, they started talking just outside our signal office. And I stepped out of the office, and this 4.2 howitzer shell landed behind him. He got shrapnel on his back and that. He was dead in line with the shell and myself. So he took what I would have got if he hadn't been there. But I'm sorry to see that. He's a very nice fellow. That's the first day we got up into the firing line, as you might say.
We stood up to the bloomin' Fritzes So there was no argument about that side of it.
And they used to drill into us. One Australian was good about 5 or 6 Germans, you see.
They didn't bloody well like the stinking little buggers. We didn't lose many in trenches. We soon cleaned up those switches.
There was a machine gun firing, and I was seeing the smoke where it was and was firing into it, and it swept round, and I thought I'd ducked down, but I wasn't down far enough, and probably a sniper got me.
So you learned to move pretty fast.
France, May 19th, 1918. Dear Mother and Father, no doubt you've been surprised to have had no news from me lately, but we've been having a pretty rough passage. Been in the front line for over a month now and still no relief to hand. We've suffered pretty heavily, over 40 in our company casualties, but since taking over we've advanced about 1,000 yards and are now in fairly good position. We've had plenty of sniping and shooting, good sport. One morning Fritz attacked on our left across no man's land, and after digging in, the Fritz kept coming, right up till midday. The weather's been glorious, dinkum Australian. Well, Mother, I think this is all this time. Very much sooner be getting ready for the theatre than getting ready for my job now. 'Tis a fighting patrol. We met 8 Fritzes last night. Well, fondest love to all. Hope they are all well and in the best of health. I'm in the best of health and spirits. I remain your loving son, Frank.
France, July 30th, 1918. Dear Mrs. Mack, I'm writing to tell you of the death of your son, Corporal Frank J. Mack. He was brought in here quite early on Monday morning, wounded in the abdomen. Everything possible was done for him, and during the day he seemed to maintain his strength. But towards evening he grew weaker and died about 8:30 p.m. I was with him 2 or 3 times during the day, and again shortly before he died. It may be of comfort to know that I buried him this morning in a quiet little graveyard far from the noise of battle. His grave is well cared for and will be marked with a cross. May God comfort you in your trouble and grant to Frank eternal rest. I remain yours very truly, Reverend G.R. Boycott, Chaplain.
Rows and rows of lonely crosses, each one tells a story. Each one was a young man with a heart that beat with youthful pride. Did those who sent them never count the cost? Did they think about the losses as I do when I look upon the rows of lonely crosses? Oh, lonely crosses.
My dear Eva, I've just learned of the death of your dear, brave, splendid boy Frank, and I hasten to offer you my deepest and sincerest sympathy. Many months have passed since he left you, months of hardship and fierce fighting for he who answered his country's call, and months of weary, anxious waiting for the lonely mother. And now, there is just one more young hero sleeping somewhere in France, and there's just one more broken-hearted mother left to mourn the death of her soldier's son, who offered his very young life so generously to him who had given it. That God may comfort you all in your hour of trouble, as only He knows how, is the very earnest prayer of your sincere cousin, Hilda.
It was a very trying time delivering a telegram to advise somebody that their son had been killed. Their reaction was something that I couldn't handle. The chap who was in charge of the telegram lads said, well, look, this is going to be sad news. Do not leave the place. The woman's on her own. See what you can do. If you can get her a cup of tea, then go and get one of the neighbours to come and be with her. And of course, you never got used to it. None of them were easy. People concerned just met with a great tragedy. I felt a part of that tragedy, delivering it.
I couldn't believe it, though. It's very hard to believe. Didn't tell me much at all. They just said that he'd been killed and that he was instant, that he didn't suffer. I couldn't believe it myself, although I broke down and that, you know, because I often think of him, you know, I can't get him out of my mind. I thank God now that he's resting in peace.
And the messages that loved ones have left on the graves, I mean, I'll never forget one. It said, "Oh, for a touch of his loving hand, a mother longing." You know, that really grabs you in the chest.
Another war, another battle, another ANZAC who won't come home, a victim of his innocence and love for his country, for Australia. Another life that was squandered on the battlefields of France. Another soul that left this earth can never be replaced, and he leaves behind another broken-hearted mother crying in the night. Still she can't believe her son is gone. The telegram delivered brought the news that she had feared, and words of comfort fall on deaf ears of another broken-hearted mother weeping for her boy, she would wake from just a dream. But you know she saw him leaving, and she knows he won't return. And for the rest of her life she will be a broken-hearted mother. The rest of her life she will be a broken-hearted mother. Broken-hearted mother.
At the onset of the war, there was a rush to enlist in the light horse divisions, but recruits first had to pass a riding test. One young hopeful in Perth mounted his horse from the wrong side and was immediately thrown. He remounted and suffered the same indignity again, and then admitted he'd never ridden a horse before in his life. He was told to practice for a week and come back. He did. This time, he was successful. The light horsemen dubbed their New South Wales stock horses whalers. They were as tough as nails. They needed to be, to survive the extreme heat, the harsh terrain, and the lack of water they were to encounter in the Middle East. On one occasion, a 16-hand chestnut carried 5 men at a gallop for over a kilometre when Turks overran their position. 2 men sat astride the horse behind the rider, and 1 man on either side with a foot in each stirrup. That one horse carried those 5 men to safety. And how they loved their horses.
Well, you had to have an affinity with your horse, something that flowed from you to the horse. Very often you didn't go up the reins of the horse. No, it was reckoned that horses could understand that.
Out on the desert, I could lay
by his hind flags, and he'd sweeping himself with his tail, and he was also keeping the flies and that off. And he never worried me, and he never threw me, and he was a beautiful horse.
Wherever you got a horse, if the old horses know you, and when you go out to feed them of a night, they'll whinny to you. You know how they do it. We're glad to see you, mate.
So I think one of the best pals I ever had. He was good, and he was never broken.
There was one fellow there, he was as tough as they make him. He used to call his little horse Sugar. And he loved that pony better than he loved his own wife.
When the war ended and the light horsemen were to return home to Australia, the decision was made to leave the horses behind. A wave of protest swept through the ranks.
Sore point. They were all examined by the veterinary surgeon, and any horse that was fit had a good chance of a bit longer service in life. They were sold to the inhabitants about there, which was an awful shame. But if he was a bit old, though he mightn't survive very long, he was just taken out in the desert and shot.
In days to come we'll wander west and across the range again. We'll hear the bush birds singing in the green trees after rain. We'll canter through the Mitchell grass and breast the bracing wind. But we'll have other horses. Our chargers stay behind. Around the fire at night we'll yarn about the old Sinai. We'll fight our battles over, and as the days go by there'll be old mates to greet us. The bush girls will be kind. Still our thoughts will often wander to the horses left behind. I don't think I could stand the thought of my old fancy hack just crawling round old Cairo with a jippo on his back. Perhaps some English tourist out in Palestine may find my broken-hearted whaler with a wooden plough behind. No, I think I'd better shoot him and tell a little lie. He floundered in a wombat hole and then lay down to die. Maybe I'll get court-martialed, but I'm damned if I'm inclined to go back to Australia and leave my horse behind.
Of the 160,000 Australian horses which were sent overseas, only one returned. When AIF Commander-in-Chief Sir William Bridges was killed at Gallipoli, his mount, named Sandy, was brought back to Australia. He was led with an empty saddle at Sir William's funeral. Sandy was preserved and is on display at the Australian War Memorial.
It was murder what some of those horses put up with. 36 hours without water sometime. It was bloody murder.
Meanwhile, in Australia, there was a spirit of patriotism. The majority of Australians supported the war effort. Stories of the ANZACS' magnificent performances at Gallipoli and on the Western Front had filtered back to Australia, and there was an immense pride in the achievements of the AIF. But for women left at home, life was difficult. They had to fend for themselves and their families, without the support of their partners, many of whom would never return to the waiting arms of their loved ones.
The little grey house had a lonely look. There wasn't a soul around, but we saw as we crossed the shallow brook that the slip rails lay on the ground. We rode in up to the kitchen door, for the stock might take the track. But a woman said with a weary smile, "My boys are absent many a mile, and we'll leave the panels down a while to wait till the lads come back." And over our sunny southern land, the same great thought holds true. From the timbered hills to the parching sand, and the wide green stretches too, all of the boys who've done their bit, though many a mate will lack, whether they come from bush or town, will know they'll find the panels down to the hearts they left, and love will crown the day that the lads get back.
You've been away so long, you might not recognize my face, but in my soul I may be left behind here in this sunburned land, but you know that I will wait for you to hold your loving hand. Sometimes at night when the world's asleep, you slip into my mind. I feel your love though far from home and loved ones left behind. Sometimes at night when the world's asleep, I steal into your warmth, shelter from the loneliness, to find a place of comfort from the storm. When I close my eyes, I hear a lonely, stifled cry from someone's son or someone's love, of men who fight and die. But one day soon I pray, across the sea and farm, I will see his face when peace is won. My love finally comes
In early October 1918, the Australian divisions withdrew from the front to regroup and rest. They were preparing to return to France when Germany surrendered on the 11th of November. The cost of 4 years of war was enormous. Allied military dead numbered over 5 million. Germany and its allies suffered even more heavily with over 8 million dead. Australia lost 61,919 men killed in action, and New Zealand 16,700. The Great War, the war to end all wars, was finally over.
The battalion commander came out with the news in early morning it was, and he said, the war's finished. All the hats went up in the air, got down in the cellars, white wine and red wine, and we all ended up, all got drunk.
Oh, they went bloody mad. Celebrations were the right term, I suppose. There could not have been any other word to describe how you could celebrate something marvellous that happened. Something just unbelievable could happen, that the bloody war was over.
That was the greatest day of our lives when we heard the war was finished.
Ended is the raging conflict. Foes are conquered, victory won. Hearts are lighter, spirits brighter, for our work is done. Thoughts will traverse miles of ocean back to those who gave their breath for their country's freedom dying, faithful unto death. Hidden is the nearing future, of our prospects little known. Hope is present, courage needed, in the land we call our own. Fathers, mothers, wives and sweethearts waiting there to greet their boys, anxious for the grand reunion and its many joys. Soon we'll reach those shores delightful, speeding onwards over the foam. Land of sunshine, dear Australia, home, sweet home.
Oh, well, the day I arrived back at Launceston, I had about 30 or 32 men or something. I marched them down to the drill hall at Launceston. Then we got our 10 guinea suit and a fortnight's leave, and away we went. But I couldn't run. If I ran to run 20 yards, I'd nearly choke. I'd have to sit down. It was about 6 years before I could run. That was the gas, you know. But I must have been pretty strong when I got rid of it. Must have. Else I wouldn't still be here.
For the returned ANZACS, the death and destruction of Gallipoli and the Western Front were at last behind them. But many would carry the horror of their experiences for the rest of their lives.
I'd been a bloody fool to go in voluntarily, jumping the bloody ship and bloody well getting to England with a spirit of bloody adventure. My guiding star, but there wasn't any stars, all bloody skyrockets and bloody bursting shells. That's all I marched into. Utter bloody murder and self-destruction. Oh, Christ, I can't get over it. I never will. I used to wake up at night when a bloody storm was on. I used to wake up at night and my poor little wife would wake up in terror because I was so bloody scared. Ah, Jesus. I was living the war over again. I didn't want to hear another bloody shell not 1,000 miles away.
Oh, he was a total wreck when he come back. Every little while he'd get on the grog and go into the horrors, and they coming, and I had to throw him on the bed and hold him down one day. That silver state he was.
I don't want to remember it. I'm bloody sorry to remember it. I try to eradicate it from memory, but it's not possible. It's not possible to eradicate some of those things.
One of Australia's last World War I ANZACs has died in Adelaide at the age of 101. After enlisting in 1916, he served on the Western Front as a machine gunner in the 27th Battalion. Despite being hurt just a few days after arriving, he took part in every action involving the battalion. He returned to France last year to receive the French Legion.
He was getting old and paunchy, his hair was falling fast. Recounting at the RSL stories from his past, of a war that he had fought in and the deeds that he'd seen done by the boys of his battalion. They were heroes, everyone. Sometimes to his neighbours his tales might seem a joke, but at the RSL they listened, for they felt the words he spoke. Now they hear his tales no longer, old Bill has passed away, and the world's a little poorer for a soldier. Died today. He'll not be mourned by many, just his mates, kids and wife, for he led an unobtrusive, quiet life. Held a job, raised a family, not complaining in his way, and the world won't note his passing, but a soldier died today. It's so easy to forget them. It was many years ago that the diggers from Australia went to battle, but we know it was not the politicians with their compromising ploys who preserved for us the freedom that our country now enjoys. If we've not done him the honor while he's here to hear the praise, then at least pay him the homage as he fades. Visualize a headline on a billboard that might say, a nation is in mourning for a soldier. died today.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
I think it would be advisable to commemorate Anzac Day as worthy of remembrance for the sake, principally, of our own survival.
Even now at Anzac Day, I find it hard to keep the tears back. It's something I can never get used to, so that it was highly emotional.
They are important days for us to remember. They will never bloody do it again.
We should remember because it established the nationhood of Australia. Our national outlook ever was for world peace, even though we march on Anzac Day. That's the prime feeling of all the people that take part in it. It was wonderful to see the people lining the streets for the one purpose of not glorifying war, but for being thankful that it was over.
I think it should be kept up. Some people say it only glorifies war. That's not the reason at all. It's they remember their mates who didn't come back, to honour them. Because nobody in their right mind who's seen war would glorify war, because it's too terrible.
On Anzac Day, I feel very sad for the men who happened to go there against terrific odds.
The men that went over there in Anzac put Australia on the map.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. And in the morning, we will remember them.
Perhaps the final words in this tribute to the Anzacs should be those of Lance Corporal A.H. McKibben. In 1918, as he reflected on the Great War, he wrote, "I'm quite convinced that it takes a real war to bring out all that is best or worst in any man, particularly when he expects to meet his Maker at any instant. I'm proud to the heart's core of the fact that I am an Australian. If ever the true story of what the fine Australian divisions have done in this war is ever truthfully told, so will you be, and thousands more."
And the bloody shores of Suvla, and the cliffs at Anzac Cove, the legend of the Anzacs came to be. They were proud to be Australians, volunteers one and all, fighting for king and country. When they find the courage for those so young, did they know their legend would not fade? And 100 years from now, the Anzacs still will
There's 500,000 Australians enlisted. Why did they all enlist?
Well, I didn't like Germans. I thought, well, somebody's got to stop these swines. I'm a trained soldier. Why shouldn't I go anyhow?
It was something that had to be done. It was my duty.
I suppose it was always dangerous on Gallipoli. You were aware that you could get killed any time.
Everybody that went to France had to be hit by something.
I had a few dangerous moments in France.
Well, we used to take much notes of bullets, you know.
You could be lucky. Lucky where another bloke had copied.
Actually, nothing was really courageous. You had a job to do and you had to do it.
The deeper you dig, the longer you live. I remember them saying, oh, we're diggers now. That's how the name diggers stuck to it.
You live together, you see, you're mates. One man do anything to help his mate.
I hate war anyway. It always leads to a loss on both sides.
War, men killed, and they never gained a bloody thing. Nothing. Turks, Germany didn't, we didn't either.
That was the border window wars. I wouldn't do it again.
Once, no more. Once, no more.
One day in the Hindenburg line, I looked up at the sky and said, oh Lord, what do you allow this to go on for?
When we won the war, you had a feeling that you'd got a victory. But I do wonder now what the devil we were all over there for. What good has it brought? It's a long, long time ago, you know.
Yet I remember what happened yesterday.
Pride of Australia. That's why I stayed.
I quite enjoyed a big battle. A bit of excitement, you know.
And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made. And 100 years from now, the ANZACS still will be the bravest things God ever made.